following broadcast is not approved by your teacher, university, politician, or government. Side effects may include skepticism, better reasoning skills, liberty, peace, and an escape from the woke.
Welcome to the show. I am your host, LB Muniz, and this is the Been Awake podcast for Better Sensemaking. If this is the first time you're listening to this show, do me a favor, go to beenawake.com, subscribe with your email address there at the SUBSTACK, and whatever platform you're listening to right now, hit subscribe. If you want to follow me on X in particular, you can find me at the LB Muniz, but hey, you can get all those links at the aforementioned website. Today, we have a great story. Joe Biden is, well, whoever it is. This, I think we can be pretty sure that this was actually done by Joe Biden, given the context. You might already know the story that we're going to talk about today. If you saw the episode title, then you definitely know what we're going to be talking about today. Let's not bury the lead. Joe Biden finally decided to pardon his son, Hunter Biden, in a move that is shaking all the idiots who live their life as journalists, wondering how this could all possibly be happening. It's kind of a weird thing to me, like the way, whatever journalism is these days, right? Like, part of the reason why I call this the podcast for Better Sensemaking is like some of what this show is in fact reporting, right? Like, I take things that I see out there and I give it to you in the best that I'm able, and not in an unbiased way per se, but oftentimes in a way that people can understand and digest in such a format that everything makes sense. And allegedly, at least how I was raised and the way I grew up, is that that's supposed to be what a journalist does, right? Take all this complicated stuff and feed it to you in a narrative that helps you understand what's going around. But that term has become so diluted in our time that, well, the need for new words arises, and thus that's where we come up with this idea of better sense making that I try to do here on the show. I would assume a lot of the people who are listening to this have stuck by the show, and for that I appreciate it. As I've said kind of recently, content's coming in waves, and I think we're all going to enjoy the wave that's coming this December. I think there's going to be a lot of interesting stories leading up to Trump's inauguration next January that need to be covered on this channel. And if I'm being honest, I got a new piece of equipment that I think is going to help. I'm not going to get into the details of that, maybe in a future episode, but we're going to see. Basically, I'm trying because I love doing this, and I really appreciate the people who still listen to the show. If you could do me a favor, if you're listening to this, and if you've enjoyed the content that I produce here at beenawake.com, at the Project for Better Sensemaking, find one person that you think might enjoy this show and share it with them. The episode format right now is very short. Hell, you could call it a vlog. I don't want to. I consider myself more of a podcaster, but there's no mic in my hand or in my face. It's right above the camera there. So whatever. I think people will enjoy it. I think we're going to get into the story, talk about some interesting context here that needs to be discussed. So let's begin. And here's where I want us to start. It's an important thing I do on the show that I think isn't done very much, where people don't worry about where they're starting a story. And every good storyteller will tell you that that's a very important part, right? Like, there's still this arcane, newscaster, radio, TV format that reporters do. And a good storyteller, a good writer, there are people out there, you might be thinking of a couple right now. I certainly am, know how to do this. Here's where we want to start today's story. That you and me, we watch politics through a veil. You can kind of think of it like the allegory of the cave in Plato, but see, I don't want to overuse a tired metaphor. That's very good in many contexts, but isn't useful for our purposes. So I wonder if you've ever gone to see a stage show, or maybe you saw one growing up. There, you can put a screen on a stage. I can't remember what it's called for the life of me right now, and that will cast, and you light up the back, and it casts a shadow of an actor on stage for everybody to see, and it's not exact, and it's, like I said, it's the shadow of a person. And you can put a screen on a stage so that you can't really see behind it. Think of like a gossamer or translucent silk that might stand between you and a dancer or you and a performer. It's kind of, and it all for the enjoyment and pleasure of the consumer, of the person watching the show that's being put on. And for better or worse, I think that's one of the ways that we should look at politics, as a show. Certainly the people involved in politics do. They understand that they're putting on a show and a performance for people, and part of what public speaking is performative, even if it's the most important subject that you could ever possibly imagine somebody discussing. It is still a performance for people. So we have to think about these things when we're talking about this. So we see politics through a veil. Not everything is apparent to us. We don't get to watch everything that happens in high resolution. Maybe, if we're lucky enough, in 50 years, we'll have a better understanding of what was actually going on behind the scenes. But for right now, where we sit in this moment, you and I, can't pretend to know everything that's going on, unless I have listeners of this show that I don't know about. So we're kind of reading tea leaves. We're kind of engaging in a form of divination, right? So there are like those who move them. There are those people out there who move other people. And then there are the people in motion. And then there are the watchers. And now with the internet, where we are in this moment with new media, there are watchers watching watchers. And then, of course, ultimately getting to a consumer. We have all of these layers between us and the thing that's actually going on. And every time it goes through one of those layers, somebody, especially the most unbiased people out there, they're the ones who they're going to fill in their emotion with the events that happen in front of them at whatever stage they're in. And that starts from an AP Newswire or a press release, right? That starts from the executive grant of clemency that Joe Biden wrote for his son Hunter, and it goes all the way to your uncle's Facebook status, because we know he's posting on Facebook. So let's get into the news portion of it, and then we'll talk about some history and then some important context that I think you should be thinking about when you talk to people or just ruminate yourself on this Hunter Biden story. To all to whom these presents shall come greeting. I do love, it's the nerd in me, I'll admit it, but I do love that in these, there's like this interesting form that has survived throughout time, even as language has changed, like therein or thereof, and these different words. So I like how this starts. I didn't realize that this is how pardons start. To all whom these presents shall come greeting. Be it known that this day I, Joseph R. Biden Jr., President of the United States, pursuant to my powers under Article 2, Section 2, Clause 1 of the Constitution, have granted unto Robert Hunter Biden a full and unconditional pardon for those offenses against the United States which he has committed or may have committed or taken part in during the period from January 1st, 2014 through December 1st, 2024, including, but not limited to, all offenses charged or prosecuted, including any that have resulted in convictions by Special Counsel David C. Weiss in docket number 1:23-CR-00061-MN in the United District Court for the District of Delaware, and docket number 2:23-CR-00599-MCS-1 in the United States District Court for the Central District of California, in testimony whereof I have hereunto signed my name and caused the pardon to be recorded with the Department of Justice. Done at the City of Washington this first day of December in the year of our Lord 2024, and of the independence of the United States the 249th. And of the independence of the United States the 249th year. Signed, Joseph R. Biden Jr., President. Now, of course, writing one quick note to talk about later. Listen, I think, at least when you're growing up and you're paying attention in history class, if you were to pay attention in history class, one of the most famous use cases for the presidential pardon was for Nixon so that he wouldn't be prosecuted for the crimes of Watergate, right? Let's not get into that. There's a whole interesting bit of history that's being uncovered about that whole thing at the moment. But if you want that, Tucker Carlson did an interview a few months back. You might check that interview out. That Nixon was there. And the part of what Gerald Ford said for this was to save the nation a travesty, or save the nation scandal, save the nation, basically. He didn't want the nation to be dragged down into one of the most popular presidential candidates being dragged through a messy prosecution. And this idea of prosecuting presidents was basically laid to rest up and until Donald J. Trump. Until Donald J. Trump was elected in 2016. And of course, after Biden won in the landslide election of 2020, and I think we're going to have to look into some of those numbers at some point here soon, now that the vote tallies are actually in. When Joe Biden won in 2020, the justice system, so-called, all of the prosecutors and judges out there who had a bone to pick with Donald Trump and what they feel he represents, decided it was time to go after the man with everything that they had. And after all of that, all the shoddy prosecutions, all the civil cases, everything that went up against Donald Trump, what happened? He won. Not only did he win, he won with the popular vote, which is like crazy to think that a Republican president accomplished that. I think anybody who says that they're surprised that Joe Biden is pardoning his son for the crimes he committed is kind of foolish. Again, if you're kind of doing it, like I'm titling this episode, OMG, he pardoned Hunter Biden. I'm kind of doing that tongue in cheek. And that's really the way you should be looking at something like this. What would you do in that situation? If you had a son, a brother, a father, and you had the power to make sure they never saw a day of prison, what would you do? If you say that you would throw them to the wolves, you're either a lousy son, brother, father, or you're lying. One of the two. Because I think if it was within our power, truly within our power, see, most people can't really fathom the power that comes. I can't really fathom the power that comes with being president of the United States like that. Sure, you still have masters, but you still get to do some things. And here's a case. That's why I said, like, this one, I think we can be pretty sure that Joe did it. I don't think Joe cared about it. Or maybe Hunter had him do it. It doesn't really matter. I think he would certainly want his son to stay out of jail. And there's a human element to the story, which is weaved through this entire Hunter Biden story that can't be ignored, no matter how awful Hunter Biden may be as a person. Now, on the one hand, he seems pretty fun to party with. On the other hand, I don't like people who party with underage girls. So, we'll leave that there. This was done on a Sunday, right, for Monday morning. Now, I guess part of that is convictions were going to come down. So rather than have the fanfare of a conviction and the headlines that would go along with that, you then just kind of wipe the slate clean at this point. So maybe that's why it's on a Sunday. But it is interesting that they did it on a Monday, on a Sunday night, considering usually when you want to bury a story, you do it on a Friday. So again, all these veils in front of us. We don't know what kind of access the Biden administration had to when they were going to do stuff. Maybe they gave him a heads up being like, hey, listen, we're going to go ahead and pull the trigger on this. Hunter's going down. And he's like, I don't think I'm going to let that happen. We don't know. It is traditional that an outgoing president gives out pardons at the end of his term, because every politician is afraid of facing the backlash from public opinion. So they wait until the end to do things that are, let's just say, in the best possible sense, virtuous. Right? If you grant clemency to somebody who was wrongfully convicted or unjustly imprisoned, that's a good thing to do. And yet it seems presidents always wait till the last minute. But hey, whatever. I guess they're all cowards in the end. So there's been a good bit of reaction to this story. I wanted to go over a couple of things before. So a couple of reactions. In particular, the one that made me jump on this story was from somebody who I don't mean to be rude. Of course, they have, they still have 430,000 followers on X. Of course, there's this tweet, actually, before we get to that. There's this tweet right here, right? Joe Biden posted 5/31 of 2024 at the height of the Trump prosecutions going on. No one is above the law. And one of my favorite community notes, oh, did they remove the notes from this, or is it just not there? So one of my favorite community notes from this is as follows. I don't know if it got removed from it, but it was certainly on X a minute ago. On December 1st, 2024, President Joe Biden pardoned his son Hunter for crimes covering nearly 11 years of offenses against the United States, which he has committed or may have committed or taken part in during that period, from January 1st, 2024 to December 1st, 2024, or 2014, excuse me. Interesting year, 2014. Let's talk about that in a second. Community notes is still one of the best things ever for a social media platform. And I've actually, not for nothing, it's kind of interesting. I've gotten approved to be, so like I go in and I rate community notes. I haven't put one on anything yet because I don't have that kind of time. I spend too much of my time on the road, as you can tell by my lovely hotel background at the moment. But I do go through and I'll rate notes on popular tweets to see, and there is some crazy stuff that happens behind the scenes. It's basically people spurging out one way or the other. And yet the coolest thing about it is when it actually comes into focus, you usually have a pretty good community note at the end of the process. So just in terms of like how the process works is actually pretty cool when you can see behind the scenes, especially given the fact that it is it could so easily be hijacked, and yet it's not. Maybe sometimes it is. Let's be honest here. Then I saw this one from SE Cup. So she's quoting. She's quoting a guy by the name of Charlie Sykes. I don't remember who he's with. I think he's like a writer for something. Says, smart person texts me. Joe Biden has just removed the issue of pardons from the political arena for the next 4 years, and Trump probably once again can't believe his own dumb fucking luck at this point. Sadly, I think it's right. And then you have SE Cup saying it doesn't get said enough, but Trump's enduring legacy will be convincing both parties to lower the bar, and that possessing moral authority on anything is no longer a currency that matters. Now, I don't want to belabor this too much, but with all of this class of talking heads that kind of rose up through the cable news cycle, and I guess were raised in a completely different world than we have now, the idea of a politician having some sort of moral currency is real. It's real to them. They don't look at politicians as calculating characters, or maybe they do and they're just lying, but again, there's that whole like tell the truth thing that I can't quite escape in my day-to-day life, which is like what gives any president moral, like truly, like, and I'm including Donald Trump, who I voted for in 2024. What actually gives a president moral standing? I think you could say they have popular support, and but I don't think we should look to, just as a general rule and as a matter of political, certainly in our current liberal political formulation of mass democracy, look to elected politicians as any sort of moral figure in our lives. And I think the most moral politicians would tell you just as much. So like for SC Cup, it said Donald Trump is lowering the bar, and it made me think of something I wrote after 2020, right around the time of January 6th, where I said that Trump is going to become the scapegoat. Now listen, I wasn't, for the record, alone in saying that. There were a bunch of other people saying that, but I did write about this and how Trump was going to become a scapegoat for white supremacy. And of course, in the leftist terminology, white supremacy is a placeholder for competence and merit. And they tried. They did try. They tried to prosecute him. And the weirdest thing that happened is that all of us who were watching, who didn't care much for Trump the first time, the second time, the third time, or even the second time, because I didn't vote for him in 2020 either, I'll be honest with you. I took a poll, and I think I said I voted for him. Or no, I think I said I voted for the Libertarian candidate, and then I remembered, oh yeah, I wrote in Kanye West in 2020. on my mail-in ballot, which came to like 3 different houses that I had, addresses that I had over the past few years. Just my own little personal anecdote about the corruption in the voting system that happened in 2020. There was multiple ballots sent to me, only one of which I received at my current address, and a few that went to my old addresses. Interesting, right? So the part of the ritual of the scapegoat is that all the sins of the people are put on this goat and it is cast out into the desert. So Trump, because he's one of those people, he's a TV star, he's a billionaire, he's the kind of person that voted and bought politicians. He's the kind of person who voted and bought politicians his entire life. He decided to do things a little differently and won. Not only won, but won in a completely unexpected way. So he was turned into the worst possible human being that you could ever imagine by the media. Again, not that the man doesn't have his faults. Of course he does. I'm just, speaking in terms of story here. And after he was defeated in 2020 in the midst of a pandemic, in the midst of riots across the country, culminating, of course, in the protests of January 6th, it was clear that this can never happen again. And so we had the continued campaign against him, the lawfare commenced against him, and a lot of us were watching. And we're like, oof, they're going to get him on something here pretty soon. I mean, they're turning all the screws, they've got all the lights on, everything's coming to light. Not that much. You have a couple civil cases that went the wrong way. I'm not going to litigate those civil cases right now, but suffice it to say, the burden of proof in a civil case is much lower than in a criminal court. He was supposedly convicted, but sentencing was stayed, and now they're dropping the charges in a lot of those cases. So he did all that, and he came through the other side. But you're right, SC Cup. Donald Trump is convincing both parties to lower the bar. Kind of crazy when you think about it that way. So I teased you a little bit before about the year 2014. We also have to think about the year was it 2020? It was 2020. So let's start there. What's the biggest story that had to do with Hunter Biden in 2020? Somebody that most of us probably weren't thinking about up until then. A little bit before, I guess, but really weren't thinking about it. Of course, his laptop came out where there's evidence not only of drug use, not only of him engaging in prostitution, but allegedly some very racy pictures that wouldn't be safe for anybody to talk about, especially on public platforms like YouTube. And when that was posted, the old Twitter did what? Made it impossible to share the story. Facebook made it impossible to share the story. You couldn't even send it in a private message. Why? Because it had all the markers of a Russian disinformation campaign. Nothing about the veracity, nothing about the truth of the matter, but we think our enemies would like this story, and so that makes this story bad. Almost like we were at war with said country. Of course, we were pretty soon thereafter, you might recall. So in 2020, we had the Hunter Biden laptop story where there was incriminating evidence. Who knows what else is on there? I don't think everything's been released. And then we have the year 2014. Why is it starting in January 1st of 2014? Well, in 2014, this little thing happened in a country you may have never heard of called Ukraine, where a duly elected president, Viktor Yanukovych, was removed from office as the consequence of massive protests and rioting against his regime. Now, the short version is he was a little more pro-Russia. The pro-EU candidate lost, and a few months later there was all these crazy protests in the street where people were able to stay out for days at a time. Food and water was provided to them. Resources were provided to them. Major politicians in the United States went there to speak at their rallies because they were all fighting for freedom. And then, the EU candidate got in. So there's this little country called Ukraine, and that's where it happened. Right? And Joe Biden bragged about how he called up that person and said, this guy better get out, or not get looked at or removed. And something else happened in 2014 where this guy named Hunter Biden was named to the board of Burisma Holdings, oil and gas company. And it's funny because Trump was talking about in his first term how there was a racketeering effect going on. But yes, these politicians are our moral center. Isn't that interesting? Now, of course, there's one more theory it's worth talking about. I think it's called Dark Brandon. If it's not, I apologize to the meme lords out there that I got this wrong. But there's this idea that secretly Joe Biden is completely with it, and he went like dark MAGA, especially after they ousted him against Kamala. Of course, there was the video of him putting on a Trump hat during the campaign. Putting on a Trump hat at the campaign, oh, put on a Trump hat. Oh my gosh, Joe Biden is so old. There's some different things out there, basically he's so bad he's causing the worst reaction against him. So isn't it kind of interesting that Joe Biden would do this? Maybe saying, hey, I'm getting out while I can, and Trump, you should too. So I hope you guys liked today's episode. If you did, do me a favor. Throw me a like on Substack or on this post wherever you're looking at it. Subscribe on your favorite platform. Find me on all social media at the LB Moniz. And of course, beenawake.com. Subscribe with your email address. Content comes in waves, so make sure you're ready for the next episode.
If you like what you heard today, go to beenawake.com to subscribe for future updates. My name is LB Moniz, and I am not one with the woke.